What's up, guys? So here is part 2 in this video series on the book The Death of Elvis. Man, I find it very fascinating, entertaining. Like, I would go and mark all the stuff that I wanted to share with you guys. I hope you find this one just as entertaining and enjoyable, you know what I mean by enjoyable, as the first video. And let's get to it.
What happened was I said goodnight to Elvis, went downstairs, got some things together. Ginger saw Elvis stretched out on the bathroom floor and thought he was asleep. Now, it's important that people understand this was something that was not uncommon. We've seen Elvis on the bathroom floor before. I've had to dislodge food from his throat when he was on prescribed drugs, so it was kind of common. But she went, showered, did all these things, and then called downstairs and said, I think we've got an emergency here. Something's wrong, and he was dead.
That clip there was very disturbing. It brings like a lot of questions to mind because this part of the book, the middle part of the book, is really when they get into the investigation part of it and the conspiracy theories. And, you know, this doesn't add up. What you said doesn't match what this person said. And so a few questions that come to mind when you see that clip was, how long after Ginger saw Elvis did she wait before she called help? What Ginger's story is from this book is that she woke up around about 1 to 2 o'clock.
At that time I rolled over and I looked at the clock and it said 2 o'clock then, and the bathroom door was still shut. So at that time I went in and I knocked on the door and no one answered. So I opened the door and that was when I saw Elvis.
According to an investigator for the medical examiner's office, the body was purple or deep blue, and rigor mortis had already set in. Elvis had apparently been dead since early that morning.
And she made a phone call to her friend that was going to be going on tour with her, wanted to make sure that she was packed and ready to go. She made another call to her mom, and then she decides to get up and, check on Elvis. She knocks on the door and then finds Elvis on the floor. Then she goes in, checks him, opens up his eye, according to Joe Esposito, and says that Elvis's eye is just like staring. So then she calls downstairs, according to Ginger in the book. But according to that last clip, which was, I believe, 1990, it was common to see Elvis passed out on the floor. And think about it though, in Elvis's state that he was found in from many witnesses, his pants were down, his shirt was off, he was like in a fetal position, stuff was thrown everywhere, and he had actually vomited also. You're just going to look at that and be like, oh, that's just Elvis. You know, he's going to let him do his thing. I'm going to go get ready for the day. Because all the reports, just about all the reports, say that that day Ginger was totally done up and all the makeup done by the time that everybody got there, the ambulance got there. She was all done up from what they say. So if David Stanley's account was accurate, how could she then see Elvis in that state and just blow it off? Like, stuff is not starting to add up. So that's where I really find it interesting in this book, where you get into conspiracy theories. So one of the conspiracy theories, or at least things that just don't sound right, is that, okay, so Ricky's brother was there earlier with Elvis. Ricky told David that don't disturb Elvis, he wants to be alone. And David had a friend there that he wasn't supposed to. It was a person that was not authorized to be at Graceland. And so when the news came out that Elvis was dead, or they believed he was dead and the ambulance is on his way, David sped out of Graceland with that friend in the passenger seat and just sped out of Graceland. Everybody's like, what? What's going on? David says that his friend wasn't authorized to be there, and so he didn't want to get in trouble. But at this point, Elvis is dead, so maybe he didn't know that. But, you know, I think that what kind of trouble are you going to get in? Like, you're already not going to be working for him anymore. So that kind of throws up a red flag. In 1986, David writes another book and says that it was actually Billy Smith that he was taking out. So you can see that these aren't adding up. Like, so there was other people there that weren't supposed to be there. And another thing the book talks about is it's very easy because Elvis was just brought up packets. Like that night, there was like 3 or 4 packets that were brought up for Elvis.
At about 6:30, Elvis called downstairs for Ricky Stanley to bring up his packet of medication to help him get to sleep, because he was so nervous about, he was always kind of keyed up before starting a tour. So Ricky brought it up, Elvis took his packet of medication and started reading a book on psychic energy then. He thought that would help him fall asleep. Then I fell asleep. So at about 8 o'clock, I woke up because Elvis was restless, saying that he just couldn't sleep. So he called downstairs for Ricky again, and Ricky came up and brought up another packet of medication.
A second packet.
Right.
And you could assume that it's very easy. I mean, even Elvis knew his pills and had a physician's desk reference, and he knew all about that stuff. But if he's, halfway buzzed, he may not be looking at those pills the right way. Somebody could have put the wrong amount of pills purposely in those little packets. You don't know. Elvis could have taken too much, not even realizing. But this is a very fascinating part here. So like I said earlier in this video, Ricky told David when he was coming in that Elvis did not want to be disturbed. Elvis was in his bathroom. They already knew that when Elvis was in his bathroom, leave him alone. And Elvis evidently told Ricky, don't bother me today till 4. So usually, like, Elvis's state was like, so it could be good or go from bad or good to bad, like, very fast. So that's why everybody was always checking on him. So Elvis says, do not check on me this morning. And not until 4. Well, Elvis died that night. So David is like, wait a minute. He died that night. Did he commit suicide? Did Elvis put the do not disturb order up because he was planning on killing himself or ODing himself? David said he knew Elvis wouldn't intentionally kill himself, but Elvis also knew that he was pushing himself too hard, and David says that maybe Elvis knew that he was going to kick out and just didn't want to be disturbed. Another thing I want to mention that I didn't mention in the first video was that when they did the autopsy, they found out that Elvis's colon and intestines were very, very large, and they were packed with like a clay-like substance, because I guess one of the symptoms of drug abuse, opioid abuse, is like it slows down the function of a person's intestines. So Elvis had a bunch of packed matter in there that he could not move. And so that was causing a lot of discomfort, water retention. His bowels were like a lot bigger, and he needed, probably surgery to get that done, but he didn't know that at the time. So that was a big find to point to that Elvis was doing drugs for a long time, because that is, I guess, one of the symptoms of it. And that also helped them in this book to try to find out and point to the cause of death being an overdose, because like I said in the first video, the stomach contents in the autopsy or in the emergency room were flushed down the drain, so they didn't have that important piece of evidence. Another thing, this is a rumor, and I don't think a lot of people have heard what this book had to say on it, but that it was the rumor that Elvis had bone cancer, and I guess that was that rumor first started by Dick Grove's book, and it was in his book that he had it. Charlie Hodge also backed it up, but the doctor in this book says no, Elvis definitely did not have bone cancer. There was no evidence that showed that at all. So I wanted to also cover that. So I also want to show you guys a few things in this video or in this book that I found like very interesting. I'm just going to show it, read it to you here. So Rivera was interviewing David Stanley, and he asked him this question. He said, did Elvis think that he was something other than a normal human being? And David says he tried not to. He tried not to. But every now and then he would get to a point where he would sit down and try to realize that he was a mortal man. David said, and then again, with that kind of magnetism, charisma that he had, he kind of took it to the limit. So David thinks that he really kind of pushed himself to see like, man, I'm Elvis. What could I get away with, David says Elvis had a death wish. He was just burnt out. Another point of this book that I want to share with you is just really, it gets you to really see what was going on at that time and what Elvis's mental state was like. So this was 1977. And at the time, Elvis was scheduled to perform at the Louisiana State University Coliseum in Baton Rouge, but he was so incapacitated by the drugs that he couldn't get out of bed. He canceled the tour that night. We only had 3 cities left. And that's when I looked at him and said, hey man, you're copping out. You're copping out. You're going down. You're fading out, and you don't give a damn. you could care less. I can't save you. Nobody can save you. Whatever you're doing it your way. And so that was the state that Elvis was in. You got to think that, like, Elvis, you know, when he came back to himself, had to be like, man, what am I doing? But it looks like he wasn't. In April, he went to the hospital to dry out. But, you know, the hospital covered for him and said it was intestinal flu, that kind of thing. So Elvis at times did try to help himself, but there wasn't really, rehabs weren't a big thing back then. He would just go to the hospital to dry out. They'd help him a little bit. And, but Elvis, you know, had to know what he was doing to himself. And so in this book, it really, the middle part of it is talking about the conspiracy theories. Geraldo's got his team and is interviewing Dr. Nick, the pharmacist that, or the pharmacy that supplied all these drugs for Elvis. So this book says that Elvis was prescribed over 12,000 pills in the last 20 months of his life.